This video contains spoilers for Legend of the Sea Devils. Legend of the Sea Devils brings us the penultimate ever episode and a story for the 13th Doctor, Jodie Whittaker, as well as the co-writer Chris Chibnall, who shares credit with newcomer Ella Road. But make no mistake, this is not attempting to be a particularly monumental or important episode of the show. As far as I can tell, it just wants to have some fun with our companions as they encounter sea devils and have a bit of a swashbuckling adventure. Did it succeed in doing so? Your mileage is definitely going to vary when it comes to how much fun you are able to have with this one. I certainly hope you were able to enjoy what it was going for, but personally, I didn't find all that much to latch onto within this story. If the main goal of this serial is to have fun and entertain the audience, then I can't say it was all that successful in its goals. Not only was I not very entertained by this adventure, but a lot of the humor completely fell flat for me. I think it almost got a couple of half-hearted chuckles, but not much more than that. This is not just true of this story, but the rest of 13's era on the whole. Within here, they try to inject humor that, for me, I just find forced, unnatural, unfunny, and sometimes cringy.
What are you wearing?
What she gave me. Too much.
Way too much.
You said that looked all right.
Yes, did you just stand up like this?
She said nautical would suit me.
I can't leave you alone for a second.
At least you didn't bring the hook.
The past 8 or so episodes have really made me start to rethink how I feel about this era on the whole, because it's almost over, and I just haven't gotten terribly much from the show in the past year or so. And I don't mean the quantity of the episodes, I mean how much quality I find within them. And a lot of the flaws I found within Flux were still there in series 11 and 12, but perhaps they didn't bother me to this degree, or weren't quite as pronounced. I don't want to get too sidetracked, but with this era almost being over, I am starting to really think about what aspects worked for me and where I think it fell short. In terms of where that stands within this episode, I'd like to talk about the Sea Devils, or the Sea Friends as some prefer to call them. I personally really enjoyed their original appearance with Pertwee. I think it's a really strong story and the Master is very good within it, but I was curious how successful Chibnall was going to be in bringing them back, and unfortunately I just got so little from their characterization and presence on screen. In the original story, there is this conflict with them having been on this planet already and coming up from the ocean to cause problems alongside the Master. It's basically the same as what was done in the Silurians, but it's different enough to work. But here, what is there to latch onto? It all just kind of washed over me, didn't engage me, and didn't present me with any particularly noteworthy or interesting situations. I mean, there's just so little to this conflict that I couldn't find myself all that engaged by it. The Sea Devils have these weird swords now, which I guess makes enough sense for a pirate story, and now they're leaping dozens of feet in the air, which is just so bizarre. It's kind of the opposite of what you want when a villain comes back in Doctor Who, for them to just be made really silly like this in a way that doesn't feel like it fits. Sure, there's always going to be some silliness to the original villain's appearance. I mean, it was made in the 70s, you know, but it just doesn't feel like this works. It feels wrong for the Sea Devils. I don't know what else to say. Nothing about their presentation was very engaging or compelling whatsoever. They felt like a monster of the week villain, but in a bad way. And their characterization within here is quite a shame to me, both because I quite liked their previous appearance in the 70s, as well as because I think Chibnall has done a rather solid job at bringing back other villains and creatures like the Cybermen and the Daleks to an extent, as well as the Master to an extent, and the Sontarans, but again, to an extent. Yeah, you're probably sensing that pattern, where there are things that do work in some of them, but not as well in others, but there are certainly elements within all of these returning villains and characters that I do appreciate to varying degrees. Even though not all of them were incredible, they all offered something. But here, the Sea Devils offered me next to nothing. They were cute though, as they were before, and I did like the design, which is about the only positive thing I can really give them. But again, I do think it worked. I think a lot of the modern redesigns within Chibnall's era of classic monsters have been pretty successful, and this is another case where the look actually is, I think, pretty good. But unfortunately, that doesn't take you far at all when their actual characterization is lacking. I was looking forward to seeing them, but ultimately found myself disappointed in how they were used. When it comes to the story itself, again, I did find myself kind of checking out at places. Unfortunately, it really did feel like we were just going through the motions. I was entertained in moments, and overall, I think the episode was okay, but I just didn't think that it offered that much to keep me engaged throughout the runtime. And it is not a long episode either. I think this one clocks in at close to 46 minutes, so it's even shorter than the other specials, and it just didn't succeed in keeping me entertained consistently. When we look at our main trio of characters, there is a little bit to discuss, but also not that much. Dan was fine, I suppose. He didn't add too much, but maybe he had a moment or two that I liked. Yaz was okay and worked well enough for her role within this story. The Doctor was probably the most mixed of the characters. She has moments of dialogue that just don't land, and I can't really blame Jodie Whittaker because it's hard to imagine anyone saying those lines well, but she also has moments where she's an engaging presence, and one moment in particular which tells us something about her actual character. So yeah, on the whole, nothing too much from our main characters, but just enough for me to not feel like they were all fully wasted within here. Addressing that moment I just mentioned, it comes towards the end of the runtime when the Doctor tells Yaz why they can't be together. As I've said before, I am going to reserve full judgment on this storyline until it is finished, as with a couple of other storylines. Having said that, I did think the scene offered something of value to her character. We get where she's coming from in a way that the show hadn't really given us before, and I appreciate that. Now, where is this ultimately going to end up in the finale? I couldn't say, but let's just say that if Yaz does die without getting the chance to grow old, yeah, I'll have some words. The supporting characters in this one are unfortunately as unmemorable as many of Chibnall's supporting characters. As always, Chibnall includes more people in this screenplay than the story actually needs, and I think that's part of why we don't get as much from our main characters as I'd like to see. And as per usual, they are not very memorable. This feels like something I should be having fun with, but for whatever reason, it just didn't click. I mean, there's pirates and they're fighting sea devils, and yet I don't remember their names or much about them. One dude stabbed a sea friend when it was on the floor. That's about it, to be honest. I'd love to be singing the praises of the supporting characters in this story, but it's just not something that Chibnall has shown to be one of his strengths. This episode is a prime example of that. They're underdeveloped, unmemorable, and ultimately don't improve the actual story. Obviously, you need some supporting characters for this story, but you probably don't need all of the ones that you do, and you'd like to see them a little bit better characterized, or at the very least not taking up space that our actual main characters could have used as character building scenes. I don't want you to come away from this review thinking that I'm a bitter Doctor Who fan who is incapable of having fun and detests any attempt at humor or lightheartedness. I don't think that's the case, I just don't think this attempt at those things was all that successful. And to be perfectly clear, it's not that the episode itself was awful or even bad. I just found myself struggling to be entertained in places. I watched the whole thing and was mildly enjoying the experience, but also had some very real issues with the overall piece that really kept me from enjoying it as much as it probably wanted me to. I was entertained-ish. Overall, I had a relatively fine time watching this episode, but found it to not be particularly successful as a fun, swashbuckling Doctor Who adventure. Our lead characters get a little bit to do, but still find themselves sidelined by supporting characters that are hard to remember the next day. It's an okay experience to watch, but really doesn't live up to the prior Sea Devil story, or even what the episode itself is attempting to be. I had a pleasant enough time watching this one, even though I think it missed the mark in a lot of ways, and I'm going to give Legend of the Sea Devils a rating of 6 out of 10. And that does it for today, folks. Feel free to let me know what you think about this special down below, and whether you also didn't find it all that special, or if you feel completely differently than me. I'd love to know what you think if you feel like sharing, and if you join me at some point in the future, I will be bringing you a review of Chibnall and Whittaker's final ever episode, as well as a review and ranking for season 14 of the classic series before long, so I hope to see you around for some of those videos whenever they arrive. But if not, that is totally cool, so long as you know that I appreciate your time here today, and with that said, thank you very much for watching, take care, and have a lovely week.